It's preparing. It looks like it's loading. One more sec. I don't know if you can see the same screen I can see.
Just say go, Crystal, and I'll wait.
Go. Go.
Bonjour. Minogijigan, Nina Mistrabe Kwe, Meganakwajuishkunigan Dunji, Mushkode Bijiki Kwe Dishnakash. Good afternoon and welcome to OWISTA's 6th Annual Native CDFI Capital Access Convening. I'm Crystal Cornelius, President and CEO of the OWISTA Corporation, and I'm a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa and Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. We're so grateful that you've joined us for our conference this year, our Native CDFIs, investors, partners, and constant believers. Thank you for your time this week. We initiated this conference 6 years ago to provide a dedicated convening to our Native CDFI industry to have the opportunity to network, build capacity, and strengthen internal efforts to attract capital and investment within our respective communities and tribal communities throughout the United States. We also created a platform where investors, funders, and interested parties can begin to take the steps to build relationships with the Native CDFI industry and learn more of the incredible work we do each and every day to build and strengthen our local economies and to provide affordable capital and credit to thousands of tribal members across the United States. With the onset of the pandemic, we've all had an overwhelming year, to say the least, and we're so grateful and also regretful that we're not able to see each other face to face as we normally would within our usual MOs at our convenings. But we've developed an amazing agenda over the next 3 days and are looking forward to hosting the best virtual conference we possibly can for our industry. As customary within our convenings and openings, I'd like to introduce a dear friend and colleague of mine, Karen Joseph, CEO of Reconciliation Canada, to offer a prayer to guide us through our convening and our interactions over the next 3 days. Karen?
Thank you, Crystal. Greetings to all of you who are one with me. I am known as Tasu, and I am a member of the Musgamagw Dzawada'enuxw peoples on the west coast of what is now called British Columbia. I join you today from the unceded territories of the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I lift my hands in thanks and praise to them for generously sharing their territories with us and allowing us to be here with you today. I also really want to acknowledge Crystal Cornelius for inviting me on this incredible journey and allowing me to be here with you today. The work that your team is doing at OWISTA is amazing and life-changing for so many people. And I also really want to acknowledge your team for taking such good care of us as we join you here today. They are incredible, and just like you. So as I begin, I am going to ask that we just take a moment to remember the children that we've lost here in the Indian residential school system. It is a heavy heart that I bring today, and at the same time, I believe that they're unearthing their return from Mother Earth to move on into the spirit world is a cry to all of us to remember who we are, to remember our relationships with one another, to remember our relationships with the land, to remember our relationships with all of the other beings, to remember our relationships with the water and with the sun and the moon. For that is what gives us strength. And that is why this convening is so important. This gathering is so important, because our strengths come from our relationships. And the way that we build strength in our communities is by ensuring that everyone is taken care of. That when we build our communities, we have safe housing, that we're able to feed our children, that we're able to get an education, both mainstream and traditional, that we're able to live upon our sacred territories and remember the teachings of our people. So although it is with a heavy heart, they also bring great hope. They bring great hope for us. And I ask that you remember them as you're going through all of the learnings you're going to be having today, because it is the customs of our people that wealth is defined not by how much you accumulate, but actually by how well you take care of the people around you. And OWISTA and the work that they do is a prime example of that. That they find ways to take care of our people. They find ways to bring strength to us. They find ways to bring strength to our families and to our communities. And by doing that, all of our children have a brighter future. All of our children are able to achieve their optimum potential. And all of our children are able to walk down the street with dignity and with pride in who they are and where they come from. And it allows them to remember the teachings of our ancestors. So I thank you all for being here today. And I ask that if you move through the convenings and each of the gatherings and the people that you will meet, that you remember that we are all in relationship with one another, and that you bring your best selves to those interactions, and that each of us takes a mind, heart action, knowing that anything we contribute lifts the whole. And by lifting the whole, we create a better future for everyone. Thank you all for joining me here today.
Chimigwich, Karen. Dzawada'enuxw. I just called you a warrior woman, and that's exactly what you are. Thank you so much for those words. And I know our hearts on the other side of the border as we hear this news. We've all prayed, and your strength and you carrying on the movement and the voices of our children. We're so very grateful. So strength and prayers to you as you continue this very heavy journey yourself, Chimigwich. I would like to now introduce some of our final messages of our convening this morning. We will be hearing from Jenny Flores from Wells Fargo and Edgar Villanueva as well within our convening. So with that, thank you so much for your time, Karen, Chimigwich, and we look forward to seeing you throughout our convening this week.
Okay, so thank you, Crystal.
That was so beautiful.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jenny Flores, and I serve as the head of Small Business Growth Philanthropy at Wells Fargo. On behalf of my colleagues, it's a real honor to be here today and to sponsor such an important convening. I applaud you for hosting this timely conversation that focuses on a topic that's a priority for Wells Fargo and for me personally, and that is, how do we make capital more accessible for diverse communities, and how do we bring forth more equity in the process? Thank you, Alicia, as well as the native CDFI and the entire CDFI network for advocating so effectively to bring additional support for small businesses across the entire country. All of you are such a critical part of the financial services ecosystem. The value of CDFIs really came to light during the pandemic. Many more people and companies learned of the role you play in sustaining the economy and in serving local and tribal communities. At Wells Fargo, we are not new to the space, nor are we new to supporting accessible and affordable capital.
We've invested early and often in CDFIs. I like to think of us as one of the most steady collaborators. Take our diverse community capital, or better known as our DCC program, which some of you were a part of. Through DCC, which started back in 2015, Wells Fargo provided grants to support infrastructure and technology that CDFIs were able to put to good use when the unexpected pandemic hit. The CDFI industry was better prepared and ready, exceeding some of the process and speed of even large banks, to mobilize swiftly and respond to the massive challenges that small businesses faced. The impact of the CDFI industry has been truly remarkable. You've kept capital flowing, managed through a massive influx of businesses trying to access PPP funding, and helped thousands of businesses adapt to a new economic reality. Wells Fargo is proud to continue our investment in native CDFIs and in an inclusive economic recovery. Know that the success of CDFIs was the inspiration behind Wells Fargo's most recent commitment, the Open for Business Fund, a roughly $420 million recovery effort that we created by donating all of the gross processing fees earned through the bank's participation in the PPP program last year. The Open for Business Fund built on the results of our diverse community capital program, which enabled $1.6 billion in loans and 1.8 million hours of training and services over a 5-year period. Because of DCC and our longtime work with CDFIs, we understood the value of grant and equity capital to your balance sheets and how it could help double or even triple the impact. Because of your deep connections in the community and your infrastructure, we knew that you could rapidly deploy the grants and low-cost capital to the people who needed it most. DCC provided us with a foundation we needed to quickly stand up the Open for Business Fund. I am proud to let you know that we have already deployed more than $6 million in capital to native CDFIs across the U.S., with more to come. At the national level, the Open for Business Fund is helping a projected 35,000 minority-owned small businesses keep an estimated 90,000 jobs. Overall, the Open for Business Fund is expected to enable roughly $1 billion in available financing and 7.5 million hours of technical assistance. While there have been many impressive wins in the past year, we recognize that millions of small businesses are still struggling, and investors, philanthropists, and allies need to be intentional about responding to their specific needs and doing more to help small businesses in tribal lands and other communities to thrive. I was struck by the results of a recent survey focused on Native women-owned businesses. I learned that over 70% of respondents said their business was their sole source of income, and that 50% were solopreneurs, not legally structured. This means that many Native CDFI borrowers are not eligible for SBA loan programs and are reliant on CDFIs as a primary or only source of capital. Again, another reflection of how important it is to keep capital flowing to Native CDFIs who can inspire, coach, and strengthen entrepreneurs. On this note, I want to encourage you to apply for the 2021 Native CDFI Awards, which is a grant program that Wells Fargo launched 3 years ago in collaboration with OWISTA and the Opportunity Finance Network. The awards honor and support Native CDFIs creating opportunity and promoting self-sovereignty measures and strategies to advance asset building within tribal communities. The application is now live, and you can find it at nativeawards.org. Often, moments like these are when new ideas come alive. My hope is that we will see a whole new wave of idea chasers who, by choice or circumstance, decided this is their moment to make a mark in the world and start a business of their own. And we'll all be here for them. I want to leave you today with this inspiring story about Roxanne Best, part of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. Roxanne pivoted from a photography business to a hybrid yoga studio and art sales to keep her business going during the pandemic. Here's her story and how OWISTA, Northwest Native Development Fund, Wells Fargo, and Roxanne work together to make a way. Thank you.
You know, I get emotional because this is right around the time that I was getting all the emails and phone calls that, you know, we're canceling this event, we're canceling this session, we're canceling our wedding, you know, all the things were really coming to a screeching halt.
Northwest Native Development Fund, we were established in 2008, 2009 to help Native Americans, especially Native American small business owners, and gain access to financial products that normally you don't see on the reservation.
Good morning, Unkitawa.
My business originated as a photography business, and this pandemic and all the things that have happened have really transitioned to be more about wellness. I also started to teach yoga classes.
Starting with our feet hips distance apart.
The standard answer when I was stressed about my business was, well, just get a real job. You know, you left with like, what do I do now?
Roxanne called us, and she was scared that her whole year pretty much vanished right in front of her.
We feel our whole body.
That devastation, like I feel like a lot of businesses, business owners, mom and pop stores like myself who are just on their own.
We've got a list of Native business owners out there, and suddenly the world gets rocked because of COVID-19, right? And where can they go for funding? Where can they go for financing?
Up to the sky with every breath.
When I received the loan from the Northwest Native Development Fund, I was in a pretty stressed out state of mind. It was a huge impact in my business and in my mindset, because then all of a sudden it took me out of what the next steps were going to be to meet my financial demands in my business.
Along comes Wells Fargo with this Open for Business product, allowed us then to go to these people now with affordable products and, hey, let us help you with this funding, get into 21, 22, 23.
Wells Fargo's participation in the PPP program created $400 million in processing fees. We committed to take those fees and not put them in our pockets, but to put them back in the community to support community development financial institutions, to provide support to a diverse population of small business owners and entrepreneurs.
That little loan allowed me to make some decisions for my business that have allowed me to grow and continue to do better and better as this last year has progressed.
The timing, especially the Open for Business Fund, it was just, the timing was just like spot on.
The Open for Business Fund will continue to make awards to nonprofits that are serving small businesses to help our small business community and help the economy get back on track.
Letting go of those feelings that don't really serve us.
If I were to give any advice, surround yourself with organizations and networks that are going to be there for you when you need them. We can have those discussions and not get told, well, just get a real job.
Hi everyone, I'm Edgar Villanueva. I'm a member of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, and I'm speaking with you from New York City, the unceded territory of the Lenape tribe. I'm a writer, philanthropist, activist, and entrepreneur, and I'm the founder and principal of Decolonizing Wealth Project and Liberated Capital. I'm really thankful for this opportunity. Thanks to everyone who had a role in inviting me, and I just honor you all and your work. Thank you again. Across American history and through the present day, the accumulation of wealth is steeped in trauma. Most critiques of philanthropy and investment point the accusing finger to things like funding priorities, grant-making decision processes, the tax code, and payout percentages. As far as I'm concerned, a focus on reforming this stuff is certainly valid, but ultimately about as effective as rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Why? Because those are the mere symptoms of a colonizing virus that has pervaded every aspect, every cell, every interaction. What remains unexamined with those kinds of reforms are frank conversations about where the wealth came from, why it's held back from public coffers, how it's invested as an endowment, and who gets to manage, allocate, and spend it. Because you see, When it comes to getting or giving access to money, we have a lot more work to do to be equitable. The stats are in my book, but take it from me, whether we're talking about philanthropy or venture capital or bank loans, even municipal bonds, all the institutions in control of access to money are often perpetuating a dominant culture mindset. Our actions as funders are more focused on preserving the wealth and privilege of a few, causing further separation and division in our society. Let's talk about the who for a minute. Who actually controls resources, philanthropy, investment? No big surprise when you think about history and who has had the opportunity to build wealth in this country. White folks, by far, make all the decisions about money. When we look at foundation CEOs, 92% are white. When we look at the boards of foundations, 89% are white. In fact, I can only think of one other Native American that serves on the board of a national private foundation in this country, just one person. When we look at financial management services, 81% white, 86% of venture capitalists are white, 96% of angel investors are white. I share these stats with you because I think the work that we're doing as Native folks to build wealth and to be able to make decisions about money in a way that is in self-determination and in transparency and accountability to our communities is going to continue to have a significant impact in shifting who has resources. And there's also a direct correlation between who decides and where money goes. When we look in the space of philanthropy where I work, this is an industry that sits on $1 trillion, that's trillion with a T, $1 trillion in philanthropic capital. We know that private foundations are only required to pay out about 5% of that corpus to communities, right? So the 95% of those resources are actually invested in Wall Street and private industry, the majority of that in harmful and extractive industries. But the 5% that actually has some public benefit that's leaving the doors of foundations to go to community, we know that less than 10% of those grants go explicitly to people of color, less than 1% to Native American organizations, less than 1% of venture capital goes to people of color. And we know this stat goes on and on and on when we look at bank loans, so forth and so on. As Indigenous people, we have a major opportunity here because we possess a worldview and a perspective to model a different way. We can model an approach that centers healing from the wounds and the mindsets of colonization and how money is used. In fact, I often describe how money can be medicine. What do I mean by medicine? In the Indigenous worldview, many kinds of things can be medicine. It can be a place, a word, an animal, a natural phenomenon, a dream, a life event. Sometimes even something that was bad that happened to us can be medicine, like the loss of a job. Any of us can find and use medicine just by allowing our intuition and feelings to determine whether something can serve as medicine. The elders say, you don't choose the medicine chooses you. It's taken me a long, long time to accept that the medicine that has chosen me is money. Because I mean, money, come on, money corrupts, money is dirty, even filthy. Money is the root of all evil, I think the good book may say. But what is money but a way to measure value, to facilitate exchange? Money is actually just a proxy for the materials we use, the services granted, the responsibilities shouldered. And in fact, take it from someone who actually went to seminary a long time ago. That's a whole nother story. The Bible doesn't say that money is the root of all evil. It says that the love of money is the root of all evil. In other words, when we let money be more important than life, more important than relationships, more important than humanity, that's the evil. I'm not saying that there aren't problems with money, when it's hoarded, controlled, used to divide, to oppress, to dominate, but that's not the money's fault. Humans have used money wrongfully. We've made money more important than human life. We've allowed it to divide us, and that is a sin. We forget that we humans made money up out of thin air as a concept, a tool for a complex society, a placeholder for aspects of human relations. We forget that we gave money its power and its meaning. Money should be used as a tool of love, to facilitate relationships, to help us thrive, rather than to hurt and to divide us. My main argument here is that in order to heal what hurts, to come back together as one human race, and to restore balance to the land, we must decolonize wealth. What does that mean, you may ask? I'm glad you did. Let's first revisit the concept of colonization. I know we as Indigenous people understand it. We talk about it a lot. It's active, it's still happening in our communities in the US and around the world. But colonization is totally normal to so many folks because the history books are full of it. And because to this day, many colonizing powers talk about colonization not with shame, but with pride in their accomplishments. It's actually the strangest thing. With colonization, settlers, they stick around, they occupy the land, they force the existing indigenous people to become them. Colonizers insist on taking over the bodies, the minds, and the souls of the colonized. It begins as a conquest and an exploitation that is motivated by greed and fear, justified by a claim to a God-given superiority. The mantra of colonization is divide and conquer, command and control, and above all, exploit. The colonizer virus, this mindset that has permeated everything that we do, how we think, how we lead, our policies, our practices, that virus inside our culture and inside our institutions is especially dangerous. Our education system reflects the colonizer virus. So does our agriculture and food system, our foreign policy, our environmental policy, the field of design, and of course, in the area that we work, the realms of wealth, investment, finance, and philanthropy, the signs of colonization are all around. So decolonization, obviously, is the process of undoing colonization. Taken literally, decolonization means that the land that was stolen must be returned in sovereignty, not only over the land and its resources, but also over social structures and traditions, is granted back to those from whom it was all stolen. It means the autonomy of every single Native person must be reinstated. For me, another way to understand decolonization is the process of healing from the trauma of it. Because you see, colonization violates us and it leaves us traumatized. In fact, it has this effect whether we were the colonizer or the colonized. What we can focus on with decolonization is stopping the cycles of abuse and healing ourselves in order to expand our possibilities for the future. This means our interdependence is inescapable. So we might as well acknowledge each other's trauma and engage in healing together. In fact, we the resilient, all of us who have been excluded and exploited by today's broken economy, we possess exactly the perspective and the wisdom needed to fix it. I'm not saying that there's no place for others for the 1%. It's just that their privilege almost always blinds them to solutions that work best for everyone. So they get to take a back seat from the decision-making table. But make no mistake, decolonization is a process with roles for everyone involved, whether you're rich or poor, funder or recipient, victim or perpetrator. Decolonizing funding and investment processes is key to our healing. After years of philanthropy, I've invested, the best I could count, $160 million. I've seen past the field's glamorous, altruistic facade into these colonial shadows, the old boys network, the white savior complexes, the internalized oppression and lateral violence among the selective few people of color or indigenous people who gain access. We have to acknowledge our woundedness to begin this healing process. That's key. In the colonizer virus, with its mantra of divide, exploit, control, it can be internalized and influence how we, even as enlightened natives, use money and lead in this work. So I'm asking that together we push back on these mindsets and these behaviors. We have to do the work of healing to dismantle the inferiority complexes and the oppressive mindsets of isolation, fear, powerlessness that can lead to dysfunctional, even abusive leadership and lateral oppression. We are a people of surplus, abundance, and reciprocity. Let's lead with an accountability and transparency to our communities. One of the most exciting moments for me, probably, I don't know, 15 years ago, I was gifted an Indian name by a Ojibwe and Ojibwe medicine man at a conference, and during a meeting that I had with him, and the name that he gifted me was, and I'm probably going to say it a little wrong. I get corrected all the time, so please forgive me. I'm not a native Ojibwe speaker, but Nigane Binashe, which means leading bird. And I've really studied the qualities of leadership in birds. I got a little carried away with it, just really wanting to understand the meaning behind this gift of this name. And it really is referring to the bird that flies in the V formation at the front of the pack that is leading the other birds. And what's really special about that particular bird is that it doesn't always have to be out front. It takes the brunt of the force, but it is very mindful of the other birds who are flying the V formation. And at times it flies to the back and it pushes the other birds forward, right? It is a shared leadership. It is a shared experience that results in moving them all forward together with much more efficiency. It's a mindset that I believe we share as Indigenous people, that we are all leaders. Everyone is a leader, that we must listen and be attuned to others. The flexibility, the trust, the humility, the ability to hold space for the brilliance of others, and rejecting Western notions of how we use money and conduct our business. See, decolonizing our way of leading in this work is about embodying compassion, forgiveness, being empathetic and vulnerable. Competition leads to lateral oppression, and that's not our way. In my work, I talk about 7 steps to healing the institutions and the culture around money. I want to just briefly talk about them here. You have to read to dig in more because it's a lot of material to cover. But these steps to healing are not just for individuals, but also institutions, organizations can actually engage in this process. The first step is to grieve. We have to stop and feel the hurts that have endured. We have to recognize the pain caused by the accumulation of wealth in the first place, how it was in most cases built and made on the backs of Indigenous people, stolen land and slave labor, low-wage workers, most of them people of color. We need to acknowledge that history long past and as recent as yesterday. We need to reopen the wounds and grieve them and apologize for them. Folks who are white have to grieve the guilt that accompanies whiteness. You can't opt out of that. You must not. You have to grapple with the messiness of that privilege. Next, we have to apologize. We have to apologize for the hurts that have been caused. Even sometimes unintentionally, I know that I've caused harm to others or made mistakes in my leadership. I have to grieve that and apologize and continue that healing process. For organizations, institutions like foundations, apologies are due for where the wealth came from, almost always from the theft of land and resources, the exploitation of slaves and low-wage workers. Apologies are due for how that wealth was maneuvered out of appropriate taxation, offshore and into havens, into foundations, and shirked its responsibility of paying for roads and bridges, public schools, firefighters, elder care. Apologies are due for the majority of investments which support harmful industries, practices, and regimes. Apologies are due for the greed and pettiness that characterize a lot of our everyday behavior and interactions around money, all of which arise out of the separation paradigm, this myth of scarcity, the idea that we're not together in this thing called life. The third step is about listening. It's really about acknowledging the wisdom of those excluded and exploited by the system who possess exactly the perspective and wisdom needed to fix it. I call it listening in color. It's a superpower that you can wield to change the status quo, no matter what role you play inside of an institution in the loans to give spectrum. You may have little influence to impact a board or CEO's funding strategy, but you can always listen with an open heart to those seeking funding. Listening attentively means holding back your own conclusions, opinions, and judgments. You don't have to jump in and say, me too, just, as to move the focus away from the person back to yourself. Give others room to breathe and to take risk in the conversation. No monologues, no mansplaining. Replace advice with openness and curiosity. The fourth step to healing is about relating, and it's really speaking to the need to create space to share our whole selves with each other and to understand that we don't all have to agree on every single point in order to respect each other. What if funders move from hoarding resources to operating in obscurity to becoming transparent, accountable, participatory? Rather than the formality of professionalism, it would rely on the wisdom of community. Rather than the dinosaur style of commanding and controlling methods in community that are based in scarcity and separations, funders, investors would embrace abundance and trust. The fifth step is about representation. We have to build whole new decision-making tables rather than setting a token place at a colonial table as an afterthought. In order for us to decolonize wealth, at least half of the people who make decisions about where money goes, at least half, that's not asking for a lot, half of the staff, half of the advisors, half of the board should have intimate, authentic knowledge of the issues and the communities involved. It is really just appalling to me that there's only one Native American that I know of that's on the board of a private national foundation in this country. Just one. That's appalling. And many of these foundations actually fund Native communities, but are doing so without any governance or accountability to a Native person on their leadership. In order for this change to happen, this means that some of the usual suspects, the white saviors, will have to give up their seats. They'll have to step back rather than just make a token seat next to them. This will definitely require an attitude adjustment for some folks. As Jordan Flaherty writes in his book on the savior complex, he says, for people born into privilege, decentering yourself can feel difficult. It involves giving up a certain amount of privilege. And when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. That discomfort is part of the healing process. The last two steps are really about how we use money, because money is a proxy for relationships. It's a demonstration of our values in many ways. Step six is about investing, putting all of our money where our values are. We have to stop this thing where we're using some money in our right hand to do good in communities, but the money in our left hand is invested in harmful and extractive industries that are harming our communities. What is the net value of philanthropy and social investment if we're doing that? We need to use all of our money in a way that's in alignment with our values. And the seventh step is about repairing. This is about using money to heal where people are hurting and to stop more hurt from happening. I do believe that money can be a form of medicine if we are putting money where the hurt is the worst. We know the hurt has been the worst in Indigenous communities, Black and other communities of color. Now, I know some of this is frustrating because since the wealth was extracted from our resources and our work, it is understandable that we get frustrated and impatient with these institutions of wealth that evaluate our worthiness and our risk potential as recipients and then give us crumbs. That's why our work as Native leaders and organizations to build our own wealth, to use wealth in our own self-determined ways to support communities is really important. It's such an amazing opportunity. We can't be dependent on these big institutions and the wealth of others to save us. This is decolonizing wealth at its essence. It's about redistributing wealth. It's about closing the race wealth gap. Now, these 7 steps are not a silver bullet solution, and it feels anti-Indigenous in some ways to even have 7 steps and make it a linear process. I had to do that for the book, but we know that healing is a circular process. These are steps that we may have to revisit and sometimes engage in the entire process over and over, because like any clever virus, the colonizer mindset keeps mutating and adapting. And in order to fully heal, we have to be very attentive and get booster shots. But let's talk about what we can all do. What we can all do is heal ourselves by taking responsibility for our part in creating or maintaining the colonial framework. We all have done this. We all have done it. We must reject it, and we must build and lead in our own way, in an Indigenous way. And we must heal our culture and our institutions and ourselves by identifying the colonized aspects of ourselves. We all have a responsibility in making things right. We all have a role in the process of healing, regardless of whether you've caused harm or received more harm. Because, you know, we all know that our suffering is mutual, all of our healing is mutual, and all of our thriving is mutual. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining today's amazing plenary. I know we're a little over time, but don't worry, we will not start the next session until we immediately close this one. So with that, I encourage you to join the Something Else in Equity in Capital Access panel as soon as we're done here. And as always, you can access your sessions via the Attendee Hub. And just an FYI, the plenaries and sessions are being recorded, and you can access them in the on-demand section in Attendee Hub. So we'll see you in the next session. Thank you.